All right, hello, I'm Stephen Sadleir, reading to you from my new book, Money and Power, The Secret History. And we've come to the section on the New World Order, which we've been alluding to. Many different presidents have talked about it. Many of these Rockefeller think tanks, places like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations, the World Bank, IMF, all these places have something in common, and that's part of the point of having this discussion, is you realize that there is this movement for a world government, which would be controlled by bankers and a certain elite. And this is being put forward. This isn't something that's made up. These are in policy papers we'll talk about in a minute. But the idea of a new world order has been around. It means different things to different people. Woodrow Wilson and Winston Churchill talked about a new world order in the context of reconstructing the world after first the World War I and then World War II. And so there was the League of Nations they tried to get started, and then after World War II it was the United Nations, the idea of coming together so that nations could talk to each other, which is probably a pretty good idea. But it being run by people without a democratic process or right to vote for these leaders is the part that I would question. Some people are for that, some against. One of the books that came out in 1936 by H.G. Wells, remember War of the Worlds? He wrote a book called The New World Order, which advocated a kind of Fabian socialism, which he was an advocate of. And it mentions this idea of an Illuminati or a special group of people that were going to govern the world. And in his fictitious book, The New World Order, it puts forth this ideology of creating a new world money that will be issued against the total purchasable output, I'm quoting his book, of the community, a total purchasable output of the community in return for the workers' services to the community. The workers' services. So it's basically a totalitarian theocracy ruled by bankers and a certain intellectual elite. Now, and George Orwell kind of took that idea and developed it in 1984, his famous book. And so we hear a lot of presidents talking about New World Order. George W. Bush wrote a paper and gave a talk on Towards a New World Order, where he states, until now, the world that we've known has been a world divided, a world of barbed wire and concrete block, conflict and Cold War. But now we can see a new world coming into view, a world where there is a very real prospect of a new world order. You got to remember, the Bush family has been doing business with the Rockefellers for 4 generations. They're eye to eye on this one. And that's not all bad. The idea of globalization and of nations working together, I think, is probably a very good idea. But there's another side to it that isn't always reported, and others have looked at this and brought certain points to mind. For instance, congressional representative have said, and a member of the John Birch Society said, the drive of the Rockefellers and their allies to create a one world government combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. He says, do I mean that's a conspiracy? He says, yes, I do. I am convinced that there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. And so this is part of the breadth of this new idea that we want to look at. What does New World Order mean? What does globalization mean? There may be some parts of this that are very noble and good and necessary, and we need to have a rational discussion about. But there's clearly a lot of very informed people that are worried about a one world government. And I think if it involves usurping the United States Constitution, every citizen of this country needs to be aware of it. So give that some thought.